they were nearly erased. Their bones shattered, scattered across the frozen earth. Their names lost to time, spoken only in silence. We once believed they vanished without a trace. But what if that wasn't the end? What if one survived? This is not a tale of glory. It is a story whispered through blizzards and buried in bony, story of exile, endurance, and haunting solitude. The Last Neanderthal. He walked the earth long after his kind had fallen. A shadow among towering rivals, hunted not just by predators, but by time itself. A ghost, wrapped in fur and frost, watching as the world forgot him. But he remembered everything. The warmth of fire, the weight of a spear, the sounds of a language no longer spoken. He was not just a survivor. He was a witness. And now, after 40,000 years of silence, his story will finally be told. They came like shadows riding the wind Cro-Magnons, taller, faster, smarter, not just a new kind of human, but a new force of nature. With fire in their hands and strategy in their minds, they swept across the Ice Age world like wildfire, and wherever they went, something ancient faded into silence. Neanderthals. For thousands of years, the Neanderthals thrived in the cold. They were strong, resourceful, and deeply rooted in Europe's frozen wilderness. But then came the giants, the Cro-Magnons, with their advanced tools, larger tribes, and unrelenting hunger for territory. At first, perhaps, there was distance, then tension, and then blood. One tribe after another fell. Not slowly, not quietly. Evidence suggests it wasn't passive extinction, but violent encounter. Archaeological records tell the story not in words, but in scars. Neanderthal skulls found with puncture wounds from weapons they never used. Rib bones shattered, faces caved in. Some injuries were precise like executions, others suggest fire. Villages burned, shelters scorched to the ground, families never rebuilt, songs never sung again. This wasn't survival of the fittest. It was a calculated sweep-a human-driven purge. The Cro-Magnons weren't monsters, but they were desperate, driven by cold and hunger and fear, and in their rise, they made room by removing the others, all of them, until none were left. None, except one. One Neanderthal outlasted the fall, a living ghost, hidden in the last pocket of the world untouched by war, watching the world change around him, a memory walking on two legs. And his story begins now. Long after the Cro-Magnons had claimed Europe, after the last Neanderthal fires were extinguished, and their footprints buried beneath centuries of snow and ash, something unexpected was found. Deep within a forgotten valley, isolated by cliffs, rivers, and icy archaeologists unearthed a mystery, a single skeleton. At first, they assumed it was Cro-Magnon, like so many others. But the closer they looked, the more the past began to whisper something else. The skull was heavier, the brow thicker, the limbs denser. This was not Homo sapiens. This was Neanderthal. And yet, the dating didn't make sense. The remains were centuries younger than the last known Neanderthal sites. The bones defied the timeline. They shouldn't have existed. But they did. No name, no tribe, no language to record his life. Just bones, weathered but complete. Silent but full of story. Whoever he was, he had survived long after his kind had vanished. Hidden? Perhaps. Or maybe he wandered, alone, through a world that no longer belonged to him, a ghost in a human age. Some speculate he was a remnanta child spared during conflict. Others believe he fled, as his people fell, escaping into the wilderness where Cro-Magnon hands couldn't reach. But a darker theory lingers. What if he didn't just survive, but fought back? Was he prey or predator? The skeletal trauma tells us little, but the location says more. Remote, wild, treacherous. A place chosen not by chance, but necessity. A hiding place. Or a hunting ground. This wasn't extinction. This was aftermath. A final ember of a fallen race, flickering defiantly in the dark. The question that haunts us isn't just how he survived, but why no one ever found the others. Because if one lived longer than we thought, who's to say he was truly alone? He was no longer just Neanderthal. He was adaptation carved in flesh, silence made flesh. When the world turned hostile, he did not fight, he vanished. By day, he hid high above the tree line where the wind bit and no Cro-Magnon dared to climb. By night, he moved like smoke through trees, through shadow, never making a sound. He studied his hunters, watched their camps from afar, listened to their strange words. He saw their weapons, their fire, their unity. And he understood something terrible. He was alone, but that did not mean he was helpless. He learned to move with the dusk, to become part of the terrain, barely a ripple in the mist. He stole tools from abandoned camps, a flint knife, a piece of sinew, a shard of bone carved sharp. He used what they left behind, not just scraps of food, but scraps of thought. He began to think like them, and beyond them. He fed not just on meat, but on memory, on ghosts. And in return, he became one. To the Cro-Magnon children, huddled near their fires, he became a story told in hushed tones. The shadow on the ridge, the echo in the cave, the eyes watching from behind the trees. They called him the beast who cannot die, not because he was monstrous, but because no one could ever catch him. No one could ever prove he was real. Only a silhouette against the moon, a whisper in the wind. And in time, even those who hunted him began to wonder. Had they failed to wipe out the Neanderthals? Or had one simply refused to die? Because legends are not born from comfort. They are forged in fear. And his still walks the cliffs when the firelight fades. For years, the Cro-Magnons believed they had wiped out every last Neanderthal. Their camps grew, their fires burned brighter, their children laughed without fear. But then, the vanishings began. It started with whisper-sown warrior gone during a night patrol. No blood, no sound, just gone. Then another, and another. Seasoned hunters vanished without trace. When their bodies were finally found, the Cro-Magnons did not cheer. They recoiled. Limbs twisted, ribs shattered, faces gouged with jagged patterns. Not the clean precision of a hunter, but the raw rage of something ancient. Some said it was a bear. Others said it was madness. But one child, pale and trembling, told a different tale. He had seen a giant taller than any man, cloaked in fur and shadow, with eyes glowing like coals watching from the trees. And when the fire crackled too loud, it vanished like a ghost. That night, the Cro-Magnons didn't sleep. What they once hunted was now hunting them. He struck with terrifying precision. From the treetops, from caves, from riversides. He knew their paths, their habits, their blind spots. He didn't just survive, he studied. To them, he was a monster. To him, they were the invaders. Each strike wasn't just revenge, it was a message. You thought me gone. You were wrong. No war drums, no declarations. Only silence, then death. The Cro-Magnons began carving new stories into stone. Not of conquest, but of warning. Because legends spread quickly. And fear faster. The ghost in the snow had returned. And this time, the prey struck back. In 2017, deep within a cold, narrow shaft of a Pyrenean cavern untouched by light for over 30,000 years, a team of researchers unearthed something no one expected. At first, it looked like any other fossilized scalancient, eroded, partial. But upon closer inspection, this was Neanderthal. And not just any Neanderthal. This skull bore signs of trauma, deep fracture across the left temporal lobe. Blunt force impact, enough to kill a modern man. But the bone had healed. He survived. A strike that should have ended him didn't. And then came the real mystery. Scattered beside his bones were not just typical Neanderthal artifacts. Among the moss-frozen stones lay a single Cro-Magnon blade, still sharp, unmistakable in design. Its edge chipped, its haft cracked, but along its hilt, preserved in ancient resinware fingerprints. Thick, broad, not Cro-Magnon, his. Scientists were stunned. This wasn't evidence of conflict. This was evidence of evolution. He had taken their tool, learned its shape, wielded it, adapted. And not just once. Carbon traces on the blade revealed multiple uses: deer fat, fire ash, human marrow. He didn't just survive in isolation. He thrived in it. Taught himself to hunt like them, to fight like them, maybe even to think like them. He became the ghost they feared, a silent blade in the dark, a living fossil shaped by vengeance, tempered by time, and sharpened by solitude. And in the stillness of that Pyrenean cave, buried beneath layers of time and silence, the truth was undeniable. The last Neanderthal wasn't a remnant of the past. He was a glimpse of what could have been. Vengeance became evolution. He left no cave art, no handprint in ochre, no burial wrapped in mammoth hide. There was no monument, no tomb, no tale whispered from tribe to tribe. Only absence, only traces, a blade, a scarred skull, and silence. But even silence can echo. For decades, anthropologists believed the last Neanderthal had vanished into extinction, a final footstep in snow, washed away by time. But whispers emerged in the highlands of the Pyrenees, of a shepherd boy with unusual strength, an old woman with eyes too wide, too gray, of lineages tucked deep in the folds of the mountains, isolated, untouched. And then came the DNA. In 2021, a genetic anomaly surfaced in a remote French village, a blood marker not seen in any known Cro-Magnon lineage. Too ancient, too divergent, too Neanderthal. It wasn't proof, but it was something more dangerous possibility. What if the last Neanderthal didn't die in that cave? What if he found others in secret outsiders, wanderers, women from Cro-Magnon tribes who had gone missing in the wilderness? What if his survival wasn't just personal but generational? Some believe his descendants walk among us still, not as beasts but as carriers of memory, living relics of a forgotten war, spirits cloaked in flesh. And in villages where the wind howls through pine, and children are told stories by firelight of a man who could not die, a shadow in the trees, a ghost with eyes of stone, they wonder if it's just folklore or blood memory, because what he left behind may not have been tools, but DNA. And what if, just what if, the last Neanderthal didn't become extinct? He became the world's first ghost story. The Cro-Magnons may have claimed the land, the fire, and the future. History marks them as the victors, the ones who walked forward while others vanished into ice and ash. But victory isn't always the final word, because sometimes it's not the conquerors we remember, but the ghosts they left behind. The last Neanderthal may never have told his story. No songs, no symbols etched into cave walls, but his silence spoke louder than triumph. In every shadow that moves just out of sight, in every unexplained flicker of ancestry, he endures, not as a king, not as a myth, but as the one who refused to be erased, a reminder that survival isn't always visible. Sometimes it lives in echoes. So before you forget, before you turn away from the bones and dust, subscribe to Prehistoric Shadows, because not all who vanish are truly gone.